Yo, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be reacting to EA has been robbing Star Wars fans of incredible games for 7 years. This is a title I saw earlier today and it caught my eye, but I figured, you know what? I want to make a reaction out of this. I don't want to just watch it because I feel like this is something that could be very, very interesting. I want to see what Battlefront Knight is going to talk about. I'm very interested. And if you don't know who Battlefront Knight is, he posts a lot of updates. He really helps the community to stay updated with everything that's going on Star Wars wise. So go sub to him. He's a big channel. But if you for some reason don't know who he is, I'll leave the link in the description down below. So go check him out. But anyways, let's get on with the video.
This summer, the summer of 2020, marks 7 long years since EA first acquired the exclusive rights to the Star Wars gaming license.
I didn't know
in
it's been that
2012,
long.
Disney purchased both Lucasfilm and LucasArts for just over $4 billion. And one of the first things the House of Mouse decided after that purchase was to shut down LucasArts completely. The publisher that had brought us more incredible Star Wars games than I can even begin to list was being scrapped in favor of a 10-year and fully exclusive licensing deal with Electronic Arts, which was announced the following summer in 2013.
Didn't know that either.
Needless to say, EA had a lot to live up to. They were taking the Star Wars license from a publisher that had one of the most impressive lineups of licensed games ever. I mean, you just look at what they put out in just a few short years, and it's almost unbelievable. Just to name a few, we have the original Battlefront and Battlefront 2, The Force Unleashed, Republic Commando, the first 2 LEGO Star Wars games, Empire at War, the Episode 3 tie game, Knights of the Old Republic 2, and that's just an...
Bro, all these games. It's just okay, I'm just gonna
name a small fraction of their lineup. I should point out, other than every single one of those games I just mentioned being published by LucasArts, you know what else they all have in common?
What?
Every single one of those games was released between 2004 and 2008. In just 4 years, LucasArts had published like 10 Star Wars games that are now considered classics. And what I just listed doesn't even come close to everything released during that time.
That's a lot.
Those are just the highlights. And of course, LucasArts had tons of other incredible games released in the years before and after the years I singled out. LucasArts knew how to handle the license. They were pretty in tune with what fans wanted, and for a time, great Star Wars games were just taken for granted. They were almost a given. So Disney handing the license over to EA, of all publishers, was met with everything from skepticism to outrage, and I think it's safe to say that very few reacted with any enthusiasm. Even the most overly optimistic fan knew that EA had a lot to prove if they were going to live up to LucasArts' legacy. That's not even to mention that every game that was already in development from LucasArts when they were shut down was completely thrown out, including a new Star Wars FPS, a game focused on aerial combat, and of course the endlessly talked about 1313, a game that was supposed to focus on Boba Fett's early days on Coruscant between the prequels and the sequels, and as a side note, that cancellation still stings even 7 years later. However, the question remains, even in 2020, has EA held up their end of the bargain? This is something that crosses my mind often while making videos, and it's an especially relevant question considering EA recently decided it was time to pull the plug on Battlefront 2 just months after the game had finally started to become something great, but long before it had reached its potential.
Still bitter.
At this point, EA has had the license for close to a decade. They have less than 3 years left on their deal, so I think it's a fair question to ask whether or not they have squandered the rights to a license with nearly unlimited potential. I mean, you give the Star Wars license to a group of chimpanzees at the LA Zoo, and they'll probably come up with something great, because you couldn't possibly screw something like this up, right? There's simply no way a public...
He's being a little petty right now. It's kind of true, but a little petty.
Publisher like EA, who I'd like to remind you have nearly unlimited resources and over 35 separate dev studios, could find a way to release just 3 games in 7 years. I mean, that would be ridiculous, especially if, somehow, 2 of those 3 games were released amid some of the most infamous gaming controversies of the decade. I honestly can't even begin to imagine such an embarrassing mishandling of the Star Wars license. Wait, no, that's a f***ing lie, because that's exactly what has taken place over the last 7 years. In close to a decade of holding the Star Wars license, which in turn has prevented any number of publishers that would almost certainly have given the IP the attention it should be given, EA has released just 3 Star Wars games: Battlefront, Battlefront 2, and Fallen Order. Both installments in the Battlefront franchise suffered greatly from EA's unbelievable mismanagement of the Star Wars IP.
Battlefront 1 sucked.
The first
I don't care what you
Battlefront, while
think.
beautiful, was not a complete game whatsoever. EA outright admitted that Battlefront 2015 was supposed to have a full campaign, but they decided to scrap it so they could rush the game out in time for the Force Awakens release. And when Battlefront 2015 launched, for those of you that remember, it was blatantly obvious that EA did not give the devs nearly enough time to put together a full-price game. The base game launched with just 4 maps for the major game modes, and you only had 1 era and 6 heroes in total, and if you wanted the Ultimate Edition, which got you a 5th map and a promise of future content, EA was expecting you to drop $120 for 5 maps, 6 heroes, and only 1 era of gameplay.
I got the Ultimate Edition like a year after the game came out for like $10 from the PlayStation Store. Got everything for $10. It was nice. Still sucked, but it was nice.
Battlefront 2015 did have its upsides for sure because of the talented people working on it, but most of the major issues that game had stemmed directly from EA rushing out an incomplete product, and then expecting players to pay a huge premium for any future content, most of which should have been in the game at release. In a lot of cases, when people say that this or that should have been in the game at release, it's at least debatable. But with Battlefront 2015, that game could have launched with all of the DLC content minus Scarif, and it still would have felt lacking in content for a game EA was trying to charge well over $100 for, at least for the deluxe edition of the game. I honestly think most people did not think EA would possibly be able to one-up themselves in the disaster department with the launch of Battlefront 2. But my god, we were so wrong. The release of Battlefront 2 wasn't just a disaster, it was perhaps the biggest train wreck the gaming industry has ever seen.
Yeah.
With a backwards monetization system, nonsensical game progression, half of the iconic heroes locked behind a paywall or an ungodly grind, and servers so unreliable it was a complete joke, the launch of Battlefront 2 was just another direct result
Still not the
EA's
most reliable
unbelievable
servers.
poor management and decision making. Their CFO even tried to justify the monetization by claiming it wouldn't be possible to monetize a Star Wars game with cosmetics because players wouldn't want to play as a pink Darth Vader.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
No, Mrs. Stay.
Despite that quote getting brought up on a pretty regular basis, it's hard to comprehend how someone at the top of a multi-billion-dollar company like EA, a company that currently owns the gaming rights to the Star Wars license, tried to claim that there isn't potential for cosmetics in a Star Wars game. I think when historians look back at some of the most bafflingly stupid things said throughout—
Such a stupid statement to make. Star Wars is one of like the most, I don't know, like one of the deepest universes. Like you could go so far with DLC content. They just weren't thinking. I don't know what I'm saying. It's dumb. They're stupid. Let's keep watching.
About the history of civilization, that statement will be used as a shining example. Anyway, because EA forced DICE into basing their entire game around a broken progression system and an idiotic monetization model, the developers over at DICE had to spend half a year rebuilding the game systems from the ground up. After some time, and because of the talented individuals working at DICE, Battlefront 2 did ultimately turn into a legitimately great game, just one that was ultimately held back by EA. And let's not forget that the second EA knew they had the goodwill of the players again, they cut support on Battlefront 2 right when it was really starting to hit its stride. Then of course we have Fallen Order, the third and final game as of right now that has been released by EA in the 7 years they've had the license. Fallen Order was a great game. I really don't have any major complaints, although I do love how in 2017, EA tried to claim that players just don't like single-player games anymore.
Just being picky.
That also came from their CFO, Blake Jorgensen, the same guy who claimed there weren't any cosmetic options they could have implemented in a Star Wars game. Anyway, then Fallen Order releases a fully single-player game that, according to EA execs, players just weren't interested in, but then of course Fallen Order shattered their sales expectations. I mean, if that doesn't tell you how out of touch the high-level execs at EA are with what they should be doing with Star Wars, I don't know what will.
This effort is no longer profitable.
We also have the unbelievable reality that in the last 3 years alone, EA has canceled 3 separate Star Wars games. We first have Project Ragtag, which was an open-world adventure game that would have you playing as a smuggler that was said to be similar to Han Solo. That game was being developed by Visceral Games, and it sounded extremely promising. The story was written by the same person who wrote the first 3 Uncharted games. Ragtag was in development for 4 entire years.
If you don't know, Uncharted's my favorite video game series. I've played all 4 games multiple times. I love the Uncharted series. That would have been so good. Okay, moving on.
before EA pulled the plug because EA felt that Visceral was, and I quote, taking too long, and EA wanted to get a smaller and easier to develop game out faster. So Visceral Games was shut down, and another studio, EA Vancouver, was given the task of reworking some of the assets from Project Ragtag into a smaller game that could release this year in 2020. Well, EA Vancouver got to work for a full year, but again, EA felt they were taking too long and scrapped the reworked version entirely early last year. Between the two studios, that is at least 5 entire years, half a decade of development time completely wasted. Then of course we have the Battlefront spin-off that was cancelled last year. We don't really know anything about it other than it was nicknamed Project Viking, and it was supposed to be a small-scale spin-off game and not a direct Battlefront sequel, and also that it was supposed to release fall of this year. But again, EA decided to scrap it when they discovered it wouldn't be ready for a 2020 release.
What would a
This
Battlefront
is all within the last
spin-off
3
be?
years. That's 3 games
How would
canceled
that
in
look
3
like?
years, and that's not even everything. I mean, Visceral Games also had a second Star Wars project in the pipeline that was also killed. It was said to be similar to the Tomb Raider franchise. At this point, EA has killed more Star Wars projects simply because they couldn't rush them out the door than they've actually released full games to the public. It's honestly kind of baffling just how badly they've utilized this license. Both Battlefront 1 and 2 are extremely emblematic of what EA's business model has been with Star Wars, which is completely centered around rushing a game out the door to meet a deadline with no concern to its launch quality, and then maybe fixing it later. Jedi Fallen Order is the only game that escaped that fate, and the reason it did is because Fallen Order was EA trying to win fans back over. Diehards of the Battlefront franchise had already seen how DICE had turned the game around to a certain extent, but many players weren't paying any attention to Battlefront 2 after its horrific launch, so EA knew Fallen Order needed to make a good impression last year. It's pretty crazy how right now, with a new generation of consoles right around the corner, and when Battlefront 2 was just really starting to hit its stride, EA decides to pull the plug on their flagship Star Wars game. I mean, right now, if you want to play a Star Wars game with active support and semi-regular new content, your only option is a mobile game, Galaxy of Heroes, a freemium app that requires players to spend thousands of dollars if they actually want to access the new content and stay competitive.
I played this for like 2 years constantly, and then I fell behind, and I haven't played it in like 2 years. But good memories.
I mean, what a joke. EA has had the license for 7 years and have done so little right with it. The disconnect between the top execs at EA, the ones who are in charge of approving what goes forward with development, and what fans actually want is unbelievable. We have Squadrons coming out this year, which we know from the leaks is a game EA only put into development specifically because they wanted to put out a quick game this year. But after this year wraps up, EA only has 2 full years left on their exclusive deal. Now, I do think it's incredibly likely that EA is going to continue developing Star Wars games after 2023, which is when their deal ends. I mean, they've already said they have plans for multiple games in the Fallen Order franchise, and I think most of us know the only reason EA supported Battlefront 2 as long as they did is so they could sell a third game without complete outrage. But I really and truly hope that after 2023, EA no longer has exclusive rights. I want competition. I want other publishers to try their hand at Star Wars games, so EA actually has some competition and can stop treating their consumers like complete idiots, because that's what they've been doing for 7 years now, pushing out unfinished games with ridiculously blatant ways of taking advantage of their players' wallets, and then acting surprised when it turns out most of the general public isn't so stupid and see right through EA's BS. The worst part of all this is just think of all of the other possible timelines. I mean, just think what would have happened if Disney hadn't shut down LucasArts. That's a reality I want to live in. I will happily abandon ship on this entire year while we're at it, just so I can live in a reality where LucasArts has been making games for 7 years. EA recently stated that they also plan to double down on the Star Wars license in the coming years, so I guess we'll see what comes of that statement. I've talked about it on the channel before. I think it definitely means we'll see more Star Wars games than we've been getting, at least in terms of quantity, but let's hope those games are actually given the development time they need, or we're just going to have a repeat situation of the last 7 years where EA is canceling games left and right for taking too long, all the while releasing games that still have major issues or just lack the content a full-price game in 2020 should have. A mistake here or there over the years of their deal would have been completely understandable, but EA's approach to releasing Star Wars games isn't just flawed, it's completely backwards, and the sad thing is, it clearly has nothing to do with the hardworking developers. It's all the decisions high up that miss the point and miss the mark by a mile. Say what you want about the mini glitches and bugs Battlefront 2 has, I mean those aren't EA's fault specifically, and I've certainly had my opinions on them, but the devs have shown time and time again through their social media that they at least understand what Star Wars fans want, even if EA hasn't given them the budget and resources to pull it off, which we've talked about on this channel before. I mean, Battlefront 2 had a tiny development team during its entire post-launch lifecycle, and even though there were questionable dev decisions along the way, those devs had to work really hard to attempt to make up for EA giving them so little to work with. Well guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I know it was basically one long rant, but I'm just so sick of EA's boneheaded decisions, and I genuinely hope we see some improvement over the course of the next couple of years, but this is EA we're talking about, so I intend to keep my expectations realistic. If you did enjoy this video and could leave a like, I would definitely appreciate it, and if you are new around here, feel free to subscribe. We just hit a quarter...
Oh, wait, what are you doing with this?
...mil, 250k, which is incredible. Thank you all so much for watching.
Congrats on 250k. Like I said at the beginning, go check him out. He puts out a lot of really good content. And let me know in the comment section what you guys thought. It shouldn't really be any news, what he kind of talked about. His whole rant wrapped up, just EA wasting our time and money. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought, and let me know any other videos that you guys want me to react to. As always, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.